Furthermore, there was now the rebranding of the British goods, because according to the Berlin decrees, all British goods which were caught, they were confiscated. So Britain now, it made an event whereby they were now rebranding goods. For example, here we've got this is a Delta good. So, if I may explain, it was an order which was given or which was mandated by Britain or by England, which stipulated that since Napoleon have evaluated that by the Continental system or by the Berlin decree, Napoleon had decreed that all British goods must be confiscated wherever they are found. Are we together? And all countries which were under the jurisdiction of Napoleon were not allowed to trade with Britain. So from 1806 to 1807, Napoleon enjoyed that benefit. Are we together? And this has now made him to grow in his economic market as part of his aim. So our question here says, how and with what success were the aims of Napoleon I continental system countered by the Allies? Are we together? So first and foremost, without wasting much of your time, you must study or you must analyze the keywords. The keywords here are how and with what success were my aims of Napoleon continental system. These are major terms countered by the Allies. So in other words, we are saying, how did the continental system of Napoleon, its failure, be facilitated by the stronghold of the Allied powers? Are we together? This is what the question is trying to say. So in this case, as you can observe here, the question interpretation you have wrote it. The question demands one to reveal the reasons that contributed to the failure of the continental system and the successes that followed after. Because they say, how and with what success? How? You can start by saying, how were the aims of Napoleon I continental system countered by the Allies? Then you go and say, with what success were the aims of now continental system countered by the Allies? So basically tatwane zvinhu two zvatinazvo. Tiri kuda kutsvaga how Napoleon's continental system yakanikandwa sei nemaAllies and vakabva vaita success ipi, of which basically the success was his downfall. No success iripo. Saka in your explanation you must include the fact that after this Napoleon akaita downfall, after this he failed to achieve this battle. Then however we can say no, the failure of the continental system or the issues of the continental system cannot kufela kwakaita continental system ndokuda kuzama nazotsvaga kuti explain say my aims aivana Napoleon pacontinental system akafela because of other factors or because of his own failures. We can pinpoint that the failure of the continental system, my aims are Napoleon continental system akauya noda kwe other factors, or we can blame him kuti ndiye akazvikonzeresa kuti the pave nefail andika then ndona yacho. Saka tikati how tinofana kubhesa kuti continental system yaNapoleon yaiva nema-aims. So what were the aims of Napoleon continental system? He wanted to dominate the European economic market, number one. Number two, Napoleon wanted to become a superpower. And number three, Napoleon wanted to conquer or to create or to maintain his Grand Duchy of Warsaw. Are we together? What was the Grand Duchy of Warsaw? It was the amalgamation of all defeated European states by Napoleon. To him, he thought that he was going to amalgamate all European states and be under his jurisdiction. So this failed because the Continental system ultimately failed because the great powers vakakwanisa kuzozvionera bva vabatana ndobva vadefeata Napoleon. Iwe ma-aims ake kuti amaintain a-Grand Duchy of Warsaw, acontrol economic market, ave mukuru wevese nechi zvakabva zvatadza kuitika. Saka taakuti zvakatadziswa kuitika nekuti Napoleon, ma-great powers kana kuti ma-allies ndo ma-allied powers ndo ma-great powers vanoti Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, they've amalgamated their armies. Then they managed to do this. Zvikaita kuti ma-aims ne-continental system aite sei afeila. Saka iwo unofanira kuti mukunyora kwako unofanira kutsvaga kuti ichi factor yandakupa iyi aim yayo yaiva yei with regards to continental system. Saka mukunyora mako unofanira kuti ndikuda kubuditsa aim yaNapoleon continental system kuti yakakonzereswa sei kuti ifeile nefactor iyi. Tikuwirirana. Saka tiri papo takuti susu the aims of Napoleon continental system were encountered by the Allied powers, taking consideration of the British Order in Council. When was the continental system issued? Yakauya rini continental system yakaiswa gore ripi? 1808 ndo pakaiswa continental system. Ndikuti saka isusu tikuti Napoleon he issued his continental system. Saka iyi ndeya 1808 handika iyi ndo zvandanchita sorry ndandaita kopi British iyi ndeya 18 tongoti 1806 ndo pakaiswa continental system handika 1808 ndo paka reply. Some they say 1807. It depends with the textbook. So we are saying Napoleon, the aims of Napoleon continental system were countered by the Allies basing on the British Order in Council. What was the British Order in Council? If I may explain, it was an order which was given or which was mandated by Britain or by England, which stipulated that since Napoleon have evaluated that by the continental system or by the Berlin Decree, Napoleon had decreed that all British goods must be confiscated wherever they are found. Are we together? And all countries which were under the jurisdiction of Napoleon were not allowed to trade with Britain. So from 1806 to 1807, Napoleon enjoyed that benefit. Are we together? And this have now made him to grow in his economic market as part of his aim. But what have made that aim to fail, it was what Britain responded with the British orders in Council in 1808, which stated that anyone who restricted to trade or who confiscated British goods was not allowed to penetrate within the European harbors, while Britain was the one who was controlling all those harbors. So this was now making it impossible for Britain or for France even to have freedom or access to my goods. But when Britain pushed this order in Council, he was supported by other allied powers, especially Russia. And this has made the continental system to fail because ultimately the orders in Council have led to the outbreak of the war, whereby Britain and France were now facing the war. Kana vava kuenda kuhondo zvakazolida kuti tive nemabattles akasiyana aizoitika between British neNapoleon. Zvabva zvaita kuti continental system ifele. Why? Because kwaita mutemo, kwaita vanhu vakuuteerera. Taurirana. Furthermore, Russia spied Napoleon. Wow. Russia agreed to sign. Which treaty was signed? Russia signed the Treaty of Tilsit in agreement that it was not going to expose the ideology whereby Napoleon was wanted to create the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, and he wanted to create what we call the Continental system. In their agreement, Russia was supposed to be given Turkey in order to silence him. But however, on the other hand, Napoleon failed to do that, and at the same time, Russia spied Napoleon and started to pass this information to Britain. And this has made Britain to prepare herself enough against the Continental system, and this has made the aims of Napoleon to fail because he wanted to challenge, Britain. So as he wanted to challenge Britain, the only way for him to challenge Britain was to make sure that there was the Continental system, but now it failed because there was the one who was now revealing the secrets. And saka kuti susu Russia, instead yekuti isanoudze Britain kuti Napoleon ari kuronga zvakati yakatotora information kwakuenda nayo kwakunotanga kutaura kuti aiwa Napoleon ari kuronga zvakati zvakaita kuti Britain isane kutogadzirira itoziva kuti Napoleon kana achironga so ini ndakudai maim aNapoleon ekuti acontrol economic setup yeMurope vaita sei vafaila. Furthermore, there was now the rebranding of the British goods, because according to the Berlin decrees, all British goods which were caught, they were confiscated. So Britain now, it made an event whereby they were now rebranding goods. For example, here we've got this is a Delta good. Are we together? Stone. So rebranding is the ideology whereby if we say we are going to confiscate all goods that belongs to Coca-Cola or to Delta, what we do isusu ndezvekuti we have got this drink ndere amino company inonzi Brothers. Instead yekuti tiise sticker iri rinenge richizikanwa richinzi this is a Delta product, tinotora sticker iri reBrothers tonamira apa, vanhu vese vongomwa madrink vachiti tiri kumwa Brothers isiri yekuBritain, so that even vanhu vaitumwa vachinoona chinhu chikaiswa muchigubhu chakadai asi riri good rimuchitora muchiridira, ultimately it makes sense kuti Napoleon afaila because magoods haasiri kuda kuti atengwe, agara ari kungotengwa. Taurirana. So this is what made them to defeat Napoleon's aims of dominating the European market. Why? Because they rebranded the British goods. Are we together? Right. Then after that, they smuggled the goods. Smuggling, it's like initiating what they call illegal trade. So some sense of illegal trade, cannot informal cross-border trade, whereby the goods they can be smuggled by the traders. Instead of them declaring them through the border or through the proper channels, the goods will be smuggled by any means. So this has made Napoleon to fail. Why Napoleon failing? Because his aim was that he must dominate the European market with these goods. But now, within his goods, there are the British goods that are arimo. Saka zvikuita kuti Britain futi irambe ichita se ichingova nepower asi haakwanise kuikunda. Furthermore, the Allied powers created a strong army because they've managed to join themselves. The army of Britain, the army of Russia, the army of Prussia, they've joined together. Vakazvijoina pavagadzira one army yakakwanisa kuzodefeata Napoleon. Furthermore, nationalism in Portugal, if it have led to the failure of Napoleon's aims of the Continental system. Why? Because when Napoleon created the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, I've given you the definition of the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. When Napoleon created the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, in his aim, according to Dennis Richards, Napoleon thought that as he was going to amalgamate all European states under his jurisdiction, he thought that all these countries, they were now going to be always under his jurisdiction. But unfortunately, Portugal revolted. They did not like to be under Napoleon leadership because according to the leaders in Portugal, they say that the creation of the Continental system was confusing or was disturbing their economic relationship with Britain. Why? Because it was affecting their international trade with Britain. While Britain was a superpower with a good economic market and currency. So now they tried to remove themselves from the Great Duchy of Warsaw. And when Napoleon tried to compensate that ideology, this has made his aim to fail, because some of other countries, they started to cope up. For example, Spain also started to revolt, and we started to witness Peninsular Wars, and this has made Napoleon to be degraded his integrity and even from his power. And above all, the Battle of Waterloo, it is known as the Battle of Nations. This has made his Continental system to fail, because according to the Continental system, there was no any means whereby there was the creation of the Fourth Coalition. What was the Fourth Coalition? The amalgamation of the British Army, Austrian Army, Prussian Army, Russia. They were going to combine. Saka izvozvo zvakaita kuti pave nefela yecontinental system, because handika iye akabva atokundwa nokuti ava vabatana iye ari one. Furthermore, the formation of the Fourth Coalition, it led to his ultimate defeat, and the continental system was now a failure. Saka Napoleon akabva. But however, despite that Napoleon continental system, its aims were its aims failed to be initiated mainly because of the Allied powers. We can take the blame on him, Napoleon himself. He was the one who have made the failure of his continental system. How? By being over-ambitious. At the time when Napoleon defeated several countries in Europe and he managed to create the Great Duchy of Warsaw, he failed to meet some of the demands he made with other great powers. For example, he made an agreement with Russia and he failed to fulfill it. That element made Russia to spy him. And at the end, this ultimately led to his failure, because there was now the formation of the Fourth Coalition, which defeated him, but it was caused by him being over-ambitious. Furthermore, he created more enemies than friends. He created enemy with Portugal. He created an enemy with Russia, with Britain, with Prussia. And as a result, they ended up having one accord against him. And this led to his downfall. Furthermore, he miscalculated his battles. For example, the battle of... He miscalculated. He miscalculated the Moscow campaign. He overrated his army to an extent that he did not prepare for a winter away, and he did not prepare enough for this battle, which led him to be defeated by earth-scorch policy and by the Great Wind of Russia at the Battle of Waterloo, as according to H.O. Peacock and as according to Dennis Richards and T.A. Morris. They mentioned that Napoleon miscalculated the Battle of Waterloo, and ultimately this has made his aims of the continental system to fail. Furthermore, he failed to stabilize his navy, because it is stated that by the time when Napoleon wanted to become a superpower, or made him when he wanted to become a superpower, his navy was passive as compared to that of Britain. Why? Because he was defeated at the Battle of Trafalgar. At the Battle of Trafalgar, Napoleon was defeated ultimately and severely by the British Navy, and he failed to revive his navy to an extent that at the end he was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, and his continental system failed. So these were some of the points that were required for this question. So if you have any question, you may ask. Don't now judge it also. And it don't